Welcome, everyone. This is part of our Wednesday morning series, and this week's presenter is Kristin Snowden. She's always here on the second week of the month, and I wanted to capture this on the recording because I know many of you, we love the people that are able to participate live, great, and we welcome your questions in the Q&A at the bottom of the screen. But for those of you that are joining, that are watching this on YouTube, etc., Kristin has started a partner group and is I've heard good things about the first one, but she's got more coming. So you can learn more if you're a betrayed partner and would like to participate in her group. It is a paid offering, but it's a modest price, and it's I think a really good benefit. KristinSnowden.com, KristinSnowden.com. So I was like, get it right. But check that out, or email me, Tammy@seekingintegrity.com, TAMI, and I'm happy to forward any information on as well. So I wanted to capture that because I have heard good things. I know you just started that group, but I was like, you need more, because I was getting enough people that were asking. I did give your name to several more people, even just in the last week again. So welcome to all of you that are here. Again, Kristin's going to present on a topic, and then she's happy to answer questions about the topic or whatever. So in the Q&A at the bottom of the screen, just type in your questions. But we're going to get started. So hello, my friend.
Hello everyone. Happy Veterans Day. If you have served or know someone who served, I just want to give a shout out to you to say thank you for your service. I realize there's a lot of compromising and sacrifice that goes with that. So I want to acknowledge that. Happy Veterans Day. Second, to kind of play off of what Tammy was talking about, I have started a few betrayed partners groups. And so it is fresh in my mind, well, how chaotic the initial first several months or year or so of uncovering this major crisis within a relationship can be. And so for a lot of these people in the betrayed partners groups, I've been trying to provide some really basic logistical guidance on the first steps, kind of the first steps out the gate. It's really tough to organize your thoughts. It's really tough to kind of think logistically, what do I need? I've never done this before. I equated to my mom suddenly was a healthy person dancing up on a stage, and the next minute she had stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And we never dealt with cancer before. We don't even know where you go. We don't even know where you begin to look to start researching where to go. And the pressure was immeasurable, because it was a death sentence, and you're just trying to find out as much information in the tiniest, shortest period of time with the greatest amount of stress and strain and hurt and fear all wrapped up in it. So I can imagine that's what betrayed partners probably feel like. I never meant to be an expert in this field. I don't even know where to begin. Luckily, if you are chiming into these videos, you are already beginning the first steps, obviously, right? You've somehow found us at sexandrelationshiphealing.com. And so let's keep talking about that. So again, today I'm going to be talking about first steps kind of after unraveling what we call betrayed partners, which is often defined as someone who is a partner or married to someone who's been sexually acting out compulsively outside of the marriage, whether it's the form of chronic affairs, so multiple affairs, sometimes transactional sex like prostitutes and other forms of that, chronic compulsive pornography, or just a lot of inappropriate pushing boundaries, emotional affairs, et cetera, with a lot of people along the way. So these partners will be married to the sex addicts, and something will bring it to their attention. Maybe they always had an inkling, maybe they always thought something wasn't working. They've obviously had a lot of, not obviously, that's not the right word, but there's been maybe some indications of some marital relational issues, but they can't quite put their finger on it. And then it blows up for some reason. And so these are kind of steps to take if you're in that zone what you can do. So first and foremost, understand that this is trauma, that this is not much different physiologically. So your body will take this experience in no different than if you were held up at gunpoint, or if you were given a terminal cancer diagnosis or a loved one was, or you got in a very serious car accident. Your body doesn't take the time to differentiate between one life-threatening issue and the other. This is life-threatening. This is your livelihood. This is a person and a family that you thought was one situation. And suddenly now the person you're married to is no longer that person you thought that he or she was, and you are turned backwards and upside down, and everything is threatened in that moment. So understand that this is trauma, and your body will be experiencing this as trauma. So there will be preoccupations, lots of flashbacks, lots of triggers from music or restaurants, etc. You'll find a hard time focusing on anything else. You will sleep too much. You won't sleep enough. You'll eat too much. You won't eat enough. You will feel heart palpitations. You will feel constant stress. And it's important that one of the biggest, most resounding things that I want you to get from this is, because you will be in a state of trauma, you have got to take the measures to self-care. So come up with that. I know it's hard to use your executive functioning in these states, but if there's little glimmers when you were able to calm down, maybe it's through deep breaths, maybe it's through seeing some friends, maybe it's through playing with your kids, church groups, support groups, etc. We've got to seek those out and make a commitment to engage them, even when you don't want to, because sometimes you'll just want to shut down, curl in a ball, and not engage. So that's first things first. Proper referrals. I'm reminded with a lot of these betrayed partners is that there's so much going on. Yes, there is, they have a husband or a wife who just deeply betrayed them, but sometimes, not always, there's other addictions going on. There's substance abuse issues. Sometimes there is a firing. So someone pushed a boundary at work because of their sex addiction and their compulsivity and problem, and they get fired. And so there's issues along those lines. There's needs for, legal referrals. There's needing to educate yourself about legal issues, family law stuff. So those are important referrals. And then there's also the potential for needing medication for yourself, for your others. Lots of people have lots of opinions about psychotropic medication. My opinion varies widely as well, but sometimes, not always, psychotropic medication is needed for chronic mental health issues, for your acting out partner or yourself. We don't know. A psychiatrist is a great person to seek out for that. But also sometimes psychotropic medication, like anti-anxiety, antidepressant medications, mood stabilizers, are needed for this season of the crisis that can help you, stay present long enough with your children or your job, or making really important family life decisions that you need to have your executive functioning turned on for, that you need to sleep for, etc. And so sometimes a referral to a psychiatrist for the season of the crisis might be helpful. Support systems. A couple webinars ago, I talked about the varied levels of treatment options that you have, right? Inpatient, outpatient, seeing a therapist one-on-one, going to support groups, going to 12-step meetings. I explain it all. I would encourage you to check that out. But there are a plethora of options of, now that the crap's hit the fan, what are my options to get help? One of the other pieces that I want you to hear is that it needs to be specialty help. Another common theme when you hear these betrayed partners groups that I remember is, we had these marital issues, or I thought they were marital issues. So we would go to a therapist and there'd be this huge focus on communication, and why are you so angry, and why don't you have sex with him anymore, or golly, you have gained a little bit of weight after the 3 kids, you know, stuff that is completely irrelevant and even more shaming and traumatizing when you do not have a specialist who knows how to ask the right questions and assess the situation. And quite honestly, when you work in this field, there's like a je ne sais quoi, where there's just kind of these little red flags that lead you to kind of want to go down past that other non-specially trained therapists might not know, that that's kind of like, that doesn't make sense. Wait, what? This has happened multiple times. I need to ask more questions about what's going on here. So please, when you seek out your support group, you've got to make sure that there's a specialist. And for instance, if your betrayed partner also has alcoholism or drug issues, or gambling or pornography, or, you know, and sexually acts out, there's got to be an expectation that all are being dealt with. So make sure that that's happening as well. Staggered disclosures. This is extremely traumatizing. What happens, and I want to give everybody grace here, but what happens is you might catch a glimmer of a story, right? You caught text messages and you just found out that your partner's been acting out with a woman or a man. And then of course that opens the floodgate where you're seeking safety, right? You just found out that your world got turned upside down. What you thought you knew to be your reality is no longer reality. So it's really common for you to need to keep asking more questions to try to find safety, to try to see if this person's going to tell you the truth. Unfortunately, most often that person is really invested in hiding their addiction, hiding their acting out behaviors. So they're not going to tell you the truth. It'll come out maybe in trickling. So it'll come out in a tiny little piece here or there. And then there'll be another piece later on. So we really, I mean, we as experts in this field encourage not allowing staggered disclosures to happen, because you can, as you can imagine, they can be extremely traumatizing, re-rip open wounds, trigger lots of emotional dysregulation, because it's so scary and it's so upsetting. So I want to validate that we really want disclosures to happen in a contained environment. So hear this, you have the right to know what has happened during your marriage or during your relationship. You have the right to ask these questions. We just encourage, there's a very general structure to it. And maybe if you have questions about it later, Tammy and I can discuss that, but there's a general structure to it to try to keep it as safe as possible, as structured as possible, to mitigate the amount of trauma and the amount of emotional dysregulation and explosiveness. So let's see. And then there's the case as if, you know, there's not enough emotional kind of manipulation and gaslighting that happens within the marriage. One of the biggest problems is that you're going to go seek out support groups from people because your life is turned upside down. And so it's common to go to other people for help, for co-regulation, for safety, because this person you're married to is not safe. And unfortunately, you hear some pretty messed up things. You, first and foremost, if you do tell them, meaning friends, family that are supportive people, and you tell them what your husband or wife has engaged in, or boyfriend or girlfriend or life partner, there'll be statements like this. There's a list here that I thought was really right on. It's no big deal. Everyone cheats. It was only one time. That probably meant nothing, and so it won't happen again. You know, just pretend it didn't happen, or, you know, or gosh, you're really, really upset still. I mean, it happened years ago, maybe, like you uncovered something that happened a long time ago. And other things like, there's just these long lists of things that your partner, the acting out partner, might be saying to kind of, well, frankly, gaslight you, that make it sound like it's not as big of a deal. Why are you acting so crazy? Maybe you need to go get medication. Well, you stopped having sex with me, et cetera. We can go on, and, you know, you ignored me. You didn't treat me right. You haven't been too busy. You haven't been there for me. And then when you go out to your support groups, there can also be gaslighting. It could be like, well, what do you mean you want to stick with him and try to work it out? This person's a monster. And gaslighting there, because I know from experience of working with betrayed partners, obviously they married this person for a reason. There's good times and this horrible thing has happened. There's children involved. There's years or memories. There's love there. And so anyone kind of point blank telling you you're crazy for wanting to stick around and see how this goes is just also, it's as helpful as your partner saying, hey, get over it. Like, I'm sorry, it meant nothing. So please pay attention to that. That's again, why we have betrayed partners groups, because there's only so many people who can hold space for these stories. They're tragic, they're terrible, they're horrendous, and you need to seek out other people who can say like, I hear you, I understand, and I get it, and I can hold space for your story because mine's pretty awful too. So there's a couple steps, there's 5 steps that I'd like you to think about doing out the gate, if you haven't already done so. And the first step is create a non-negotiable boundary or set of boundaries. So if there's a current affair going on, in order for me to stay in this marriage or to stay engaged in this situation, I'm going to have some non-negotiables. Sever ties with the affair partner. We need to put new software up on the home to prevent and block all pornography use. No more acting out or going to massage parlors. Remove any kind of triggers or people. There might be people that you were acting out with. And so, sorry, you can't hang out with those drinking buddies that you would go out on business trips with, go get wasted, and then go act out with. Get tested. Obviously, when there's unprotected sex going on, there can be STDs and other things going on between that in that exchange. Sometimes the non-negotiable will be, if you want me to stay in this relationship, I need you to enter into some kind of recovery program. So again, it's, I've noticed the theme. Every time you go out and drink with these buddies, you end up in a massage parlor or with a prostitute. So you need to not be with those people anymore. You need to not be drinking anymore until we figure out what the situation with that is. It alcoholism, or is it just, a part of your acting out behavior, but we need to spend some time investigating that, and then not doing any of those behaviors, right? That's another thing that specialists in this field do is pull apart the patterns that, again, you shouldn't even be trained to or understand or know how to figure out. But that's what we kind of understand from the years of watching the way that these engagements and these acting out and these compulsivity type behaviors happen, is they often happen in a patterned type way. And we can help define what sobriety is going to have to look like. It's not just don't do this, don't do this. It's a collective of patterns and putting puzzle pieces together. And then once you have those non-negotiable boundaries, come up with a consequences list. So if I find out that you're watching porn again, if you don't go to the meetings that you have committed to go to, if you don't get tested, if you don't sever ties, right? And these are really scary things to do. This is going to rumble with your already extreme shame state, your trauma, fear of rejection, abandonment, which is already going to exist because this is the most shaming and rejecting and abandoning experience. But that is also, I have a lot of videos on talking about that. When you're setting these boundaries, you have to rumble with those voices of, what if he says no? What if she says, pound sand, I don't want to do this, or I don't have a problem, you have a problem, things like that. That's really scary. So getting support to set those up is important. Next thing is setting emotional boundaries. So setting up things that are going to require you to have emotional and mental health support. So don't allow disclosure in the home, only allow disclosure to happen in the setting of a trained therapist. Require that your acting out partner engage their sponsor every day to make sure that he or she's working on keeping his side of the street clean. get babysitting for you so that you can maybe go to your support groups, or you can have some quiet time, or you need to go get your exercise. That he or she, the acting out partner, must inform you if the treatment plan for him or her changes, or he or she misses meetings, or anything like that is going on. That's just something to think about, right? Because it's all about making sure that you can healthily transcend this crisis. Physical and sexual boundaries. As you can imagine, there's got to be boundaries set once you've found out that this has happened in your marriage. You're going to probably feel very unsafe. And sometimes, not always, sometimes there's this reverse effect where you maybe in the state of your own trauma are more sexual, or want to try to keep the person in the marriage. So you're having more sex with him or her. So setting physical and sexual boundaries outright and talking about it explicitly with your partner can help. You might not feel safe to change in front of him or her anymore. You will not usually feel safe to have sex or physical contact with them, or who knows, but that is something specific to you and what allows you to feel safe. And you really have to sit down and listen to your heart about, what do I feel safe with doing? What are my rules of engagement for physical touch, for sexual touch? Where am I with that? There's a note in something I was referencing. It's about talking that sometimes relapse happens a lot in that first year. Sometimes. And so therefore having unsafe sex with your partner is not advised, because then you might still be exposing yourself to those kind of diseases. Steps 4 and 5. 4 is boundaries with people, places, and things. Here's some examples that I thought were really great about how to set examples for people, places, and things. So it might be that I need you to change your job because most of your acting out partners were involved with your job, or there's a lot of acting out on business meetings or business travel. And so maybe I need you to change your way that you engage in that. That's obviously been off the shelf recently a lot because of COVID. There's not that much business travel, but then that means when we get back online, you're going to have to start creating boundaries around that. I want a new pornography filtration software installed in our computers. Sometimes clients, we talked about this before, they put GPS apps on their phones. So there's an agreement that I get to know where you are. So I can just look on my phone and know where you are. Or I know other people who've had open transparency in their text messages, where I can read and see all of your text messages, all of your phone calls, because maybe there's a lot of acting out affairs going on via text message with other women. Let's see. Sometimes it's, I want to move. I want to go to a different city. We need to go to a different church. We need to go to a different area. But these are boundaries on people's, places, and things that I need, again, to feel safe. This is also going to include, as we're entering the holidays, it's November 11th today. We are beginning the holiday season. And if the shit just hit the fan in the past couple months, 7, 8, 9 months, you might be seeing people for the first time in many months. And there needs to be an explicit discussion about who you're willing to tell, what you're going to say to them, what the rules of engagement are going to be, what you feel comfortable with doing and seeing and not. And so that needs to be discussed as well. Lastly, and a very important part, is building your support network and making a plan for your own self-care. You have got to sit down. And again, I know when we're in this crisis state, even thinking of calming self-care things just seems so far away. Like going to a large concert, because that feels so far away these days, right? We can't even wrap our brains around that. But you've got to take the time to think about that. Again, getting hugs from safe people makes me feel more safe. Walking my dog makes me feel safe. Going to a therapist appointment makes me feel safe. Going to these support groups. There's S-Anon meetings. So that's like a Al-Anon for sex addict partners. Going to these betrayed partners groups on sexandrelationshiphealing.com makes me feel safe. Reading articles, listening to podcasts. I actually encourage that. I'm a really like cognitive person, but this stuff is so confusing. The gaslighting and the manipulation and the denial and the minimization from the acting out partners, at least initially before they get recovery, is mind-blowing and mind-bending. And so I often encourage people to just fill their brain with the truth. I send a lot of Rob Weiss's podcasts to clients so they can hear these experts talk. And the more they can hear it, the more they can create the framework in their brain for what recovery looks like, what makes sense. And then when their partner comes at them with minimization and what's the big deal? Yeah, I'm not going to any meetings this week. I'm really busy. And you have the framework to explain why you don't feel comfortable with that, why it feels extremely unsafe, why you're furious and raging that they say it so casually and dismissively. And you have the presence of mind and the language to be able to be an advocate for yourself in this deeply confusing, crisis-filled time. So that's one of my strategies. Sometimes it doesn't work for people, but it's like, it's a double whammy in my mind. Go for that long walk that's healthy for you and throw in some podcasts of something, another expert from Rob Weiss, so you get that language for you at the same time. And sometimes you don't want to do that. Sometimes you want to break from it. Sometimes you want to hang out with girlfriends and pretend like your life hasn't been turned upside down for just 2.5 seconds. So those are generally the things that I think are the most immediate needs for that. And I see we already have lots of questions, so let's get on that.
We do. I was like, and my self-care is I have a little candle, scented candle. I'm doing no, seriously, I was like, I need to be more intentional. So I was like, I'm going to be hanging out here for a while. So I've got wafting of a pleasant scent coming. Yes. And I was like, that just, I was intentional. My therapist had told me she suggested, she didn't tell me. She suggested that because I do better if things are suggested to me.
Right.
So, but she suggested that I be very intentional. So I am very intentional about, the self-care, what I'm doing, what I'm taking in, and all of that. So for those of you that are joining us live, in the chat, I put the points, and then I got a little confused because you said in 4 and 5, and I was like, oops, I've already typed 4. So there's kind of a summary of what Kristin was sharing, for the steps. So please feel free to take a look at that. But the first question, Kristin, is how do we handle disclosure when we are separated and in different states for a couple of months? And with COVID, do we wait until we are back together or go forward with everyone on Zoom?
Disclosure is always dependent on lots of things, right? It depends on what the plan is. Is there a plan for reconciliation? And because often disclosure is meant to be multi-purpose. One of it is because the acting out partner has usually kind of wrapped him or herself in a blanket of denial and minimization. And so actually creating a timeline of how many times they acted out and how many boundaries they crossed that they really didn't think that they crossed and that it wasn't that bad. Writing it all out is kind of hard to deny its existence when you have it written all out. So that's one of the purposes. And then the second is when you do the disclosure with your partner, it's this idea that a common shame voice in a acting out partner is, if any of these people ever really knew me, they wouldn't love me. This is all fake. So yeah, I have a wife or a husband or a family, but they don't know this dark, cavernous, black hole of this world that I live in, these lies that I tell, this huge house of cards that I've built, and they don't know. And if they really knew me, they wouldn't love me. And so the idea is that if you're planning on reconciling with a partner, you have to have a disclosure to get that out, to shake out all the moths in the closet and then move forward. And then for the betrayed partner, it's an opportunity to say, okay, this is it. Hopefully it will help my neurobiology. I mean, it's shocking and earth-shattering. I'm not going to minimize that. It's a difficult experience, but at least at that point, then you'll feel like, okay, so we can start from scratch. And by the way, it doesn't go gracefully like that. Like, I have no words to properly demonstrate the chaos that occurs during the disclosure, and the feelings involved in it. But those who decide to hear it, and many times I've watched, them hear it, and the feelings later is a bit of a relief, because it's like, I always knew stuff didn't make sense. For years, it just didn't. And now at least I know, like, this was it. This was happening. And then you have to kind of decide how you're going to basically be moving forward from there. So anyway, handling disclosure when you're separated in different states. Well, again, thanks to COVID, we're actually really good at doing these kind of things remotely. I work sometimes with a husband-wife combo that will do these remotely. So the husband will sit down and work with disclosure, building the timeline. The wife will support the betrayed partner. They'll create structure and plans. Is it going to be done remotely? Will you be doing it in the same space? And then there's a polygraph afterward. That's how that particular couple structures their disclosure process. It's going to be different for different people. And so about waiting till you get back together or go forward is, you have to ask yourself that, what feels safe for you. If you feel like you need to work on it and move forward with it now, and you can't move forward without it, then you might need to be working on it now via Zoom and get it done. So
yeah, and it was interesting. Dr. Rob has a peer consultation group, so other professionals join him every Tuesday, and this topic, disclosure, comes up every single week, I swear, because the therapists are struggling with how to do this with integrity during COVID, and so how to create a safe space, because like Kristin said earlier, disclosure in the same house, not a good choice. So how do you create the safety for both people? Now you're multiple states apart or something like that, so so you have that safety, but what is the plan for you? And really going back to what Kristin said, of what is the purpose of disclosure, and that is to provide a foundation for healing and to move forward, in the relationship. So it depends. All of those are factors. I would listen to your professionals and see what they advise. And if they're struggling with what to do, they can join Dr. Rob's peer supervision group, because we talk about it, and it really is on a case-by-case basis. There are some couples that are, like, they mostly know things, and so it's just kind of the formality of that. But Dr. Rob said yesterday, a good disclosure is almost cold, in that it's a couple of pages. I was on a group recently, and someone was talking about, I'll leave it more vague, but they were talking about they're going to have the second half of a disclosure almost 2 months apart, because there was so much stuff. I know, I was like, oh my God, I can't even imagine the trauma that partner is left with, and the shame that the addict is, like, that to me did not feel like a recipe for success. That felt like, I mean, it's data. It really is data, and, and moving things forward. So disclosure, and not every partner wants disclosure, honestly. I mean, I mean, some of them go, it's bad. I know it, I know enough. I don't need, more details. Some of them, it's bad, I'm leaving. Everybody gets to pick. And I think that's why it's an ongoing discussion for clinicians of, like, how do we do this, so that we are best able to support our clients. So that's a very open, general answer to your question. And hopefully there's some nuggets in there that are useful. So next question. And this was interesting, because you were talking about that with sexual boundaries, but boundaries make sense that no longer allowing sexual acting out with limitations such as strip clubs, social media sites, affairs, etc. But what type of boundary is acceptable for sex and intimacy? It seems there is no clear answer to this. What is okay to do in the bedroom for healthy, fun sex, or not to do? And what I don't know is if this is the betrayer or the betrayed asking this. I have a suspicion, but not sure.
Okay. Well, the reason why there's no clear-cut answer to this is because I can never define for you what feels safe to you in sexually and intimately. So for me, let's say I was giving an example of hugs from safe people feel safe to me. I have to determine who the safe people are. You know, after betrayed, it might be like my children and like a mom or like a close friend or from my dog or something like that. It might not be other types of people, or it might not be any kind of hugging or touching whatsoever, because hugging might be too much for me. It might trigger my sympathetic, you know, highly agitated response. So that has to be the question. And I think a really important, so that's the first one is really sitting down and thinking about what feels healthy and safe to you. And then I think the second part is that you have to check your heart and your motivation about, is this for me or is this for my acting out partner? Right? Because I will say it is sometimes, not always, common for you to not feel safe enough to say, okay, so I just found out that my partner's been cheating on me for years, having sex with a bunch of other people. They've told me that I'm unattractive, that I stopped having sex with them after kids, and that I'm really boring in bed, and all these really hurtful things. And so the last thing you feel safe to do to hold on to your marriage is to be like, well, now I really don't want to have sex with you because I just found out that you're a monster. So your body may be telling you this man's or woman is a monster and I don't want to have sex with them, because you have to usually feel safe to want intimacy with someone, to feel okay with them. But there's a part of you that out of shame or fear or rejection or abandonment, you'll want to engage in those behaviors. So it's really important that you do the work, hopefully with a professional, to figure out if I'm doing this for, I guess, manipulative reasons, or truly because the sexual experience, I can kind of separate it out and this is a healing experience for me. It feels good. I like it. And it's done safely. So.
Well, and I think, I hear often from partners where the relief in hearing someone say something honestly, like they actually feel closer, even though what they heard was horrible, but they feel closer because this person's finally being honest. So they want to have sex with them because, now we're on a different level. And so all of those things are true, and it is complicated. Dr. Rob just did a podcast with Bill and Ginger Burkaw on sexual reintegration. I think that one will post tomorrow, or drop tomorrow. I guess that's the right term. It'll drop tomorrow. So check that one out. That, they really talk about how to navigate after, there's been betrayal. How do we do this, and what, and I think they do it in a, in a slower manner, so that you're really experiencing, because acceptable for sex and intimacy is vulnerability. So, I mean, sex addicts have sex all the time and it's not intimate. So, intimacy is talking about what is safe for both of you. I mean, that's intimate,
right.
Clothes on, intimacy, so,
yeah.
So, you're right. There's no, unlike alcohol and drug, where you stop,
just
sex, food, all of this other stuff is more complicated, and finding what the right path for you is, and then your partner. I mean, even with food, it's like, what's right for me, it doesn't affect other people necessarily, but with sex, now it's you with someone else. So having that discussion of what's right for both of you in this moment, and continuing to have the discussion of how do we, okay, here's where we're at now. Is this working for both of us? So it's a process. Next question. My husband is sober, but not in full recovery. We are in a couples therapy. This has been going on for 16 months, and I still feel hurt and sad. He has been told he needs to go to individual therapy, but he attends meetings, no sponsor. We've been married for a long time, almost 50 years. Our insurance does not cover a therapist that is trained in sex addiction. We do not have any funds to afford the help. He has been acting out with cyber sex, chat rooms, and porn. He has a 6-year emotional affair with a lot of sick S&M fantasies and other sexual talk, gifts, exchange, etc. All the acting out as far as I know, covered a total of 13 years. How do I help myself feel happy in my marriage? I do self-care and attend all the support groups. This is a hard road, and I agree with that. I do the work, but I feel he does not. I have been told he has to do the work.
I know. I hear that story often, and I'm sorry. That trapped and sad and hurtful feeling is a tangible one for a lot of people in that situation. As far as finances and getting help goes, and again, especially during this COVID era, all 12-step meetings are at the fingertips of everybody, right? 12-step meetings are free. There's Sex and Porn Addiction Addicts Anonymous. There's Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous. There's every kind of narcotic, drug, alcohol Addicts Anonymous programs. Los Angeles, the area where I live, is kind of famous for having really great recovery. You could even be watching Los Angeles AA meetings from the comfort of your own home. I know too, what I love is like sexandrelationshiphealing.com's created these workshops where they can, it is not therapy and it is not to replace therapy, but it is a really beautiful complement to therapy and to the work that you do in 12 steps, which is those 12-step men's workbook groups that you guys have going on, right? To really dive in to understand, because I hope everyone is understanding, and Scott and I, another content provider of sexandrelationshiphealing.com, are trying to get everyone to see is that 12 steps isn't just these 12 steps. It's this concept, it's this community, it's these life-changing ways of looking at life and engaging life that are so much more than just the words 12 steps. And so, you know, we've been writing a book to try to explain this to people who might not otherwise engage in it and want to understand it, because there's stigma around addiction sometimes. So what I'm trying to say is that if finances are an issue, there's meetings. And then you're saying, she's saying that, you know, he's not doing the work. I feel like I am. It is really hard for you to heal your trauma if you are continuing to be exposed to the trauma. And so, you know, we're talking about non-negotiable boundaries and being so bold as to creating some consequences to them. I can't tell you what those non-negotiable boundaries are going to be. I can't tell you what those consequences should be for you. You have to determine those. But what I am hearing from your words are, I don't feel safe. I'm not feeling safe. And it's because my partner is continuing to not choose to be in recovery and do a full kind of leaning in and humbling and surrendering himself to a full recovery program. You know, can my neurobiology, can my state of being handle this constant state of threat that you're feeling all the time?
And yeah, I hear the same thing, that there, you know, he's not doing enough. And, you know, there's so, just like Kristin said, there's so many meetings online, and then you can get sponsors online. So at the very least, and I mean the very least, you know, being fully engaged, doing, you know, you've been married a long time. I suspect he's retired. He can be doing multiple 12-step meetings every single day, or in conjunction with our drop-in groups, et cetera. And the guys do get sponsors, or, you know, other peer connections, you know, in our drop-in groups. The work group that Kristin mentioned, we have, we had one start early November. We're going to have one start in January, and we're getting enough people asking. We're probably going to go ahead and start one in early December as well. These are 6-week courses, 90 minutes, going through the Sex Addiction 101 workbook, structured. It's Dr. Robb talks about, it's the psychoeducation that you don't get when you go to therapy, because when you're in therapy, you're doing your right, individual work, et cetera, or group work. But this is the psychoeducation that are components of treatment. So for a low cost, it's $350 for 6 weeks. You're facilitated to work through that. And we will, for women who may be listening, we have a Sex Addiction 101 work group starting in January. So we haven't forgotten, you know, we have that offering as well. So I've heard nothing but good feedback about that. It isn't therapy, it isn't treatment, but it is providing, you know, people with guidance, sorry, real life. So I moved in here to be quiet. So, but anyway, so, you know, it is providing structured support to, it's really easy to have, you know, oh, I have that workbook. Have you done it? Well, or
Right.
I've skimmed through it or whatever. This is, you know, there's homework, you know, so it really is guided. But I want to key in on, how do I feel happy in my marriage? And I'm going, I want you to find happiness for you. And then there's your marriage. So I really do. I know lots of partners who've been able to find support and happiness regardless of what their loved one is doing. It takes time, it takes work, but you know, the chaos that he's in does not have to, you know, completely upend your okayness. You know, it is something to keep, you know, it's a challenge, and I'm not saying it's easy, but you can get there in knowing you're here, you're getting support. So you are not just your marriage, you know, it's a factor, but you can find, you know, happiness. And the word I like is joy, because happiness always feels like it's fleeting on whatever's going on. And, you know,
I like
oh, that makes me happy. Contentment is a great one too. Yeah, contentment or joy are things that, you know, I can have regardless of the circumstances happening around me. So, you know, that's a more internal thing for me, but I love contentment. That's great. Okay, so next question. I am new to this betrayal. I'm so glad you're here. I am so sorry. Like Kristin was sharing earlier, you know, I was like, yeah, no one gets a manual for, and then when this point in your relationship, you're going to have to deal with this, you know, like you were sharing about your mom and the pancreatic cancer. No one knows how to deal with this stuff. So I have been working on myself in the betrayal process. I feel the SA partner isn't working his program or taking it seriously. Any recommendations for me? Should I just be focusing on myself?
Right. Well, at this time, I mean, yeah, that's the difficult thing. It's trying to say you're only one member of a relationship, right? And so you can't control that other person. And sometimes you can be doing the definition of insanity, trying to control another person's sickness or struggle or choices. So it's maddening to say this, because I understand how maddening it feels. But yeah, you can only focus on yourself. You can only run your own program for healing and for recovery and for a better understanding and footing for what's happened, right? That's how trauma is healed. Trauma is this like debris that floats in your body and your brain because it doesn't know where to file away. You know, I use the example that like September 11th, the day the terrorist attacks are so confusing because planes aren't supposed to fly into buildings. Other countries aren't supposed to suddenly kill thousands of people without ever, but like without warning and being so blindsided and having no language for it, right? Trauma gets transcended when we educate ourselves, contextualize and better understand what happened, how it happened, how to make myself safe in order for it to be prevented in the future, potentially, how to create safeguards and structure to keep myself safe, right? Those are the ways that we find ourselves being able to transcend through traumatic crisis events. And so despite what your partner chooses to do, you have to continue that journey, right? Because no matter what, the trauma has happened, the crisis has occurred, and that is the only way you're going to get through it. You don't know if your partner is going to ever choose to get out of the madness and the insanity cycle, but you can.
Yeah. And my experience has been the more partners are able to put up safe boundaries for themselves, the more the addicts are pushing up against that, the more they're realizing that there are consequences for not changing. And often that can be the impetus for them to start, you know, doing some more intense work. Yeah, addiction is I was talking to a partner earlier today, And the crux of it was, the addict is very compartmentalized, and, they're thinking that they're this amazing person and they're people pleasing and they're doing all of this stuff. But on the other hand, they're betraying the person that loves them and all, and I was like, yeah. And in the addict's mind, both are real, like,
right.
I'm still going
right.
to, I'm justified to do this because I'm a people pleaser and I really am such a good person and all of that. So it's really challenging until the consequences of changing are less problematic than, well, I'm trying to say this, until the pain of change is less than the pain of remaining, we stay the same. So it's one of those, it's just challenging, this is our coping mechanism and everything else. So I love that you're here. Continue to learn, continue to get support. There's a betrayed partner group on sex and relationship healing today at 12:30 p.m. Pacific time. So please, I'm subbing in, join the group. They're amazing women. They resilient, some are staying, some are choosing to leave but all are there to support each other. So I hope you join.
Yeah. And another, I was just going to say one story that I like about delineating is, and again, this man wasn't a sex addict, but he's the one telling the story. And he said, he would probably define himself as a rage addict. He was very rageful, passive aggressive. And so his wife, kind of seeing the writing on the wall that he wasn't willing to get help, she started doing her own work. And so she started kind of working on herself, building her own life, building her own healing process. She was very religious, so also kind of forming connection with her higher power to kind of surrender what she doesn't have control of. And of course, as he feels her kind of pull away to do her own healing process, he starts an affair with somebody. And so he walks in one day to her room and says, you've not been a very good wife to me. You haven't been giving me enough love and attention. So I've started this affair with this woman and I'm going to be leaving you for her now. And her part of the story is that she'd done so much kind of work that she'd come to this level of acceptance that this marriage may work out or it may not, but no matter what, like, I need to learn how to stay afloat despite the chaos going on. And she said, it sounds like you have a problem, but it is not me. And so you go do whatever you need to do, but I'm pretty sure that no one will ever love you the way that I've loved you.
Wow.
And he's the one telling the story. And his response to that was, first and foremost, freedom. Like, because his whole life, he worked out a duty and obligation and always felt the smothering of, I have to do this stuff. This is what's required of me. And he did it always so resentfully and ragefully, right? And so first it's like, well, what do you mean? Like, I'm not responsible for you. I'm not like supposed to go fix something. And she's like, no, go do your bad self, whatever you want to do. But then the second was like, holy crap, she's right. And it was a pivotal moment in their marriage that shifted. And it doesn't always happen so Disneyland beautifully, right? But I thought that was a really great story to demonstrate how sometimes you working on yourself can really shift the system. It's not done gracefully and it's not done without chaos and hurt. So know that, but it can shift it later and eventually to a better place.
And there's support. I mean, unfortunately, you're not alone, but, so please lean in. The podcasts the Sex, Love, and Addiction podcast, or the Overcoming Betrayal and Addiction podcast, all of them are on sexandrelationshiphealing.com. Kristin has done some on with Dr. Rob on there as well. I did put a link for the lecture work group series. And the other one, if someone is struggling, a male is struggling with chemsex, co-occurring sex and chemical addiction, Dr. David is starting November 30th, a co-occurring work group. And his is only 4 weeks, but the guy's is very small. It's far more participatory. That's a hard word. Interactive. It's interactive. So, Dr. David is really engaging, a small group of guys, for that one. So if that's a fit, check that out. They are not mutually exclusive, meaning, if you're a fit for one, you probably, please, if Dr. David's is a fit, still consider the sex addiction, sex and porn addiction 101, and we have guys, sex, porn, co-occurring, right, whatever, but it's, structured, facilitated time, no more than 25 guys on that one, at a time going through that. And like I said, hearing good things. So the next question, Kristin, you can answer or not answer. Are you both also betrayed spouses? And the big guy that walked through, never has betrayed me. I have had profound betrayal, previous relationship, including a few years ago with a situation, and I'll leave it more oblique, but 10 months of nightmares. And I'll tell you what, it really gave me a whole lot more empathy for partners. So even though it was so incredibly painful, I'm crying. I will take it because I have far more understanding for the pain of the spouses, but not even spouses, partners, that anyone who's gone through betrayal has experienced. I'm in recovery from addiction, multiple winners, and so I always had that lens, and could be empathetic with addicts that want to heal, and understand that it isn't just easy. Well, I'm going to quit, but unfortunately, a very painful personal experience, has led me to have far more deeper, real, right, emotional understanding for what partners go through. So,
right. And similar to what Tammy's saying, I have also experienced what my reality was is profound betrayal. But by the way that we define betrayed partners in sexandrelationshiphealing.com, they're often betrayed partners whose partners would be diagnosed or fill the brackets for sexually acting out, sex addicts. I am not a betrayed partner in that respect. But again, I have several years of experience working not just with the addicts, but with betrayed partners as well, and with a lot of trauma as well. So I've become a huge advocate for betrayed partners, and I can feel deep compassion and understanding for both sides, actually. Never an excuse, but just understanding and compassion for what goes on both sides. So
I mentioned I'm subbing in, and every time I'm on one of the partner groups, I always feel for the next addict that calls me, because they're, probably going to get the earful of, do you know, right, how, I mean, if they had a measure of understanding, and I think they do, I really do think addicts on some level do, but it's so painful to have to look at, and shaming and all of that. So, but if they could just, hold the space for just a few minutes and really understand, that they can change, and that it can be different for them and their loved one, everybody would be, running to get the right help, and unlike the partner that said he's not really doing much, like they would be going, whatever I need to do, I'm all in, just like we are for our addiction. So
yeah. And it's really incredible. So
okay, we are out of time. Thank you all for joining us today. Thank you, Kristin, as always. Great webinar, great information shared, and very practical tools. And for those of you, if you are a betrayed partner and would like to consider her group, it's an online group, KristinSnowden.com, KristinSnowden.com. And of course, always sexandrelationshiphealing.com. And seekingintegrity.com has that work group. For those of you that can't see the chat, seekingintegrity.com has the work groups. There's a number of different offerings. So I'll see you in December, Kristin.
Yes, thank you. I will see you in December, because this all continues.
Yes, exactly. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.